What's going on, people? We are Tottenham TV, back here for another Tottenham update. We've got a bit to get through with the sporting director situation and the manager situation today. And let's start off with Tim Steidten. I think that's how you pronounce it, but he's a German sporting director, formerly of Bayer Leverkusen. Fabrizio Romano says that he understands former Bayer Leverkusen director is one of the top 3 candidates to become the new Tottenham sporting director. Brentford's Lee Dykes, he's high on the list as well, but would take an important bid as the club considers him as a top director. No decision has been made yet. And this Tim Steidten is a very interesting one because he spent 4 years at Bayer Leverkusen, recruited the likes of Piero Hincapié, Florian Wirtz, Jeremy Frimpong, Edmund Tapsoba, as well as Moussa Diaby, and I'm sure there's many more to that list as well. And you look at the Bayer Leverkusen squad now, stacked with absolute talent. On top of that, he was very much involved in recruiting Javier Alonso as well as their manager, which could obviously be of interest for the managerial role as well. So I think it's a really interesting one, to be honest. And he was really recently speaking, and this is one of his quotes, and he says, "I need to feel my word carries weight. It has to be a function in which I can implement and change things." That was the case with Werder, and it also was the case with Leverkusen. So he needs to feel that at Tottenham.
Definitely, and that's going to be one of the big challenges for any new sporting director, is getting his way and making sure he manages the politics of Tottenham, which is a very political club. Look, he's had an impressive time at Bayer Leverkusen. He's only been sporting director this season, but obviously, as you mentioned, his one managerial appointment was very forward-thinking, getting Javier Alonso his first proper job in European football. And look, I think that was a very creative choice, and clearly it's worked because there's been massive improvement in a European semi-final as we speak. And I think Alonso is a progressive manager who's proven his chops so far, which is pretty impressive. As you say, he was head of scouting at Bayer Leverkusen for the previous years before that. And his not only has been finding good quality in the market, but actually really good prices as well. And he's been able to get really good loan deals, not just in the European market, but South American market as well. And he's clearly been able to implement a scouting system that's been able to identify talent for really good prices. So if he's the one we want to go for, clearly I think with Javier Alonso, that's the kind of appointment we're looking for. So if he can find a kind of a managerial appointment similar to that, with the scouting department implemented what he's been finding with really good talents, he could be a very good move. Obviously, he's not been a sporting director for that long, so whether you're...
Well, he was a sporting director at Werder Bremen as well.
He was a sporting director. Okay, I don't know how well he did
years,
there.
yeah.
I don't know how well he did at Bremen. Obviously, he did a very good job at Leverkusen.
So at both clubs, at Leverkusen and Werder Bremen, he was head scout and then got promoted to director of football, sporting director, whichever way you want to look at it.
So must have made a really good impression.
Yeah.
And he clearly likes to get players young as well. And the prices they paid, I'd fit Levy to a T if he can kind of dig into that market he's been finding. That's what we kind of got to be looking for, to be smarter than the opposition, and clearly that's what he's been while he's been at Leverkusen.
Absolutely. We'll get into the Nagelsmann thing in a second about why it broke down because of the sporting director, but let's talk about the other one that's on the list, in Thiago Pinto at Roma. Ali Gold says that an unnamed candidate, Thiago Pinto and Tim Steidten, are among those under consideration to become the new director of football at Tottenham. But he says that Brentford's Lee Dykes is not thought to be in the running, and I imagine that's because it's going to cost too much money to get him out of there.
Yeah, and maybe he's happy at Brentford as well, but because he clearly has a lot of sway in what's going on at Brentford, and they're pretty settled, they know what trajectory. He's going to be well sought after, but I'm assuming, yeah, money's definitely got to be in look, when it comes to Pinto, I spoke about him a couple of days ago. He does seem to be an interesting choice. I feel like with Pinto, though, in terms of what we're looking for strategically wise, I'm not 100% sure if he fits the bill as well as maybe Tim does, Steidten, or maybe someone like Spurs. He apparently has a motto, win at all costs, which sounds good. We've had 2 managers who win at all costs recently. Hasn't kind of worked that way. So do we want another manager who's just going to do everything to win now, a sporting director who's going to do everything to win now rather than try and build a project? But look, he is doing fairly well at Roma right now under Jose Mourinho. But again, they're also signed players like Matic, Dybala, older players. Is that where we want to go through?
You look at the profile of players that are coming through the door at Roma. That is just not the profile of player that we're looking for at Tottenham. We're looking at Gigi Wijnaldum and all these players.
Although they have brought in some quite a lot of young players, haven't they?
But I think on a general basis, they're bringing in players that that's going to fit that Jose Mourinho mold that we didn't do when we had Jose Mourinho at the club. And I think Thiago Pinto is probably good for that, but is he good at spotting the real up and coming talent like a Steidten, like a Johannes Spors? You know what I mean? I'm not so sure.
But he was sporting director of Benfica for quite a long time as well, and obviously they've been known for their ability in the transfer market, bringing young players, the amount of players they sell as well. There's their chock-a-block of talent. He's been able to bring through people like Ruben Diaz and stuff like that. So maybe that, and João Felix as well, he brought through for the Benfica Academy. So maybe that is a better kind of representation of what he would be at Tottenham. But for me, it doesn't seem like the right fit on the face of it.
Yeah, I completely agree. But in terms of the last sporting director that we're going to talk about today, and he goes by the name of Johannes Spors, we brought you the news a couple of weeks ago now that he is a contender for Tottenham. Dan Kilpatrick says that Johannes Spors, who has been linked with Tottenham Hotspur's director of football job, is not a contender. And do you reckon that has anything to do with the Nagelsmann thing and him turning us down, and because of the sporting director?
We'll speak about the Nagelsmann thing in a sec, but it's peculiar because apparently he seems to be a leading candidate, and all of a sudden since the Nagelsmann news it has gone quiet. So maybe the two are linked. It would be a shame because he did seem to be someone who could be a good fit as well, but it seems that we want to go in a different direction. Maybe this uncertainty, as we say, is putting off potential candidates.
Seems that way. But in terms of the guys that are linked with us, you're looking at Tim Steidten, Pinto, Dykes. I mean, Dykes looks like it's not going to happen. But in terms of those two, I mean, there's one clear front runner for me, and that's Tim Steidten.
Yeah, from what we can see in the research we can conduct on very surface level stuff. Obviously, we don't know about how he deals with people and stuff, but he seems to be a choice that would definitely fit Tottenham, especially as well with his managerial appointing someone like Alonso, who's kind of up and coming, under the radar kind of manager who they got very early in his first job, and he seems to be having very progressive tactics, plays the football maybe Tottenham fans want to see. So that seems like a promising option.
Yeah, agreed. But let's move on and let's talk about the managerial search now, and let's start off with Ryan Mason. As Dan Kilpatrick says, that Ryan Mason, who did reiterate his desire for the permanent job after the defeat at Aston Villa, increasingly feels like an option, despite one win from his first 4 matches in charge, albeit in very difficult circumstances. And I was just waiting for this kind of news to come out, to be honest. And it all makes sense because all the managers that we're going for, Poch has gone, even though we didn't make contact with him. Nagelsmann was our number 1 target. Now we're not interested in him whatsoever. And the managers that we're going to speak about later, there's all question marks about them as well. So, I mean, it kind of makes sense, but it just will represent where this club is at.
Yeah, I think so. And I just don't think it's the right time for him right now. I mean, he's going to come under so much pressure early on, especially not just because he's battling against his own quality, being 31 years old. He's got so much to battle against, like the fan pressure, the pressure from the board, the pressure to get results, and also the pressure of getting all the players on side. Like, as soon as people see chinks in the armour, they're going to pounce on that. I'm just worried about it. And as much as he could be a promising manager in the future, I just don't know if this is an appointment for right now. I just think he needs more experience. I don't know if he has the personality to take this club back to where it wants to be. Maybe he can get the players to instill those principles that we want to see from these players in terms of giving everything and getting the players behind him. Maybe he could do that, but I just have serious doubts about whether, tactically, and whether in terms of the timing, it's the right move right now. I just don't see it. I mean, I'd be very surprised if he give him the job and he's a success.
It's interesting with Mason because he in his mind and his mentality seems like he is I'm ready, I want the job. We didn't hear this from him 2 years ago, did we? We just heard we'll see what happens and blah blah blah. But he seems so focused in his mind that he is ready for the role, and that Tottenham maybe should give it to him. But I don't know, I think that if we do hire Ryan Mason, it just represents exactly where we're at as a football club right now, and that is nowhere where we want to be, unfortunately. But I was saying on the panel yesterday that if you bring in Ryan Mason, it just plays into the narrative of everything that's going wrong at this football club. It really does.
It also shows a lack of direction as well. It's we don't know what we're doing, so let's just appoint the guy who's in charge right now. That's exactly what it feels like.
But if you've got all these managers and none of them want to come and everyone has reservations, Ryan Mason's probably the only manager on the planet that is being yes, I'm desperate to be in that role. The only one. And why is that? Because he's not a manager.
Yeah, and because what an opportunity it would be for him at such a young age to get that kind of role. And of course, he's going to have that self-belief. Look, a lot of, when you get to that level, you know, being a professional footballer, you have to have that kind of self-belief in yourself to get to that level, in my opinion. So obviously he had to end his career early, but going into management, I'm sure he would have brought that with him.
Yeah, I mean, if you ask me what would I prefer to keep Ryan Mason in the role or bring in like someone like Luis Enrique, who I don't think is going to last in this job and stuff like that, I probably would prefer to side with Ryan Mason. Not because I think Ryan Mason is a better manager, but I just feel like the board and the fans might be a bit more patient with someone like Ryan Mason, and Luis Enrique will just like kick his toys out the pram at probably the first opportunity, where Ryan Mason, we maybe could get a bit of longevity, get him learning on the job, and the players seem to really like him, and the players seem to respond to him a little bit. So I think that as much as I don't want to see Ryan Mason as our manager, I can kind of see how it does make sense to a certain extent.
I think it's too big of a job for someone like him right now.
I agree. I'm not saying it's not, but I'm just saying, what I'm saying is that we all know that everyone is just coming in here and failing, kicking their toys out the pram because they're not getting what they want from the board. I think Ryan Mason will probably eat that up and probably deal with it.
Yeah, he would. He's probably would be a yes man, yeah, because he's just grateful to have the job.
And I think that's what Enoch and Levy need. They need yes men in the job.
Potentially.
So that's why I'm saying he's probably more suited to someone like a Luis Enrique or someone like that.
Actually, no, I don't agree that's what they need. I agree that's what they want.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
But let's move on. Let's talk about Roberto De Zerbi now. Paul O'Keefe says that De Zerbi is certainly of consideration at Tottenham, but there is still some question mark over suitability and the fit. He would require a lot of control and staff. Well, if you require a lot of control, Tottenham ain't the place for you. But look, I love De Zerbi as a manager. I think that he would do a great job here. But look, I don't get the question marks over suitability and fit, because I think he's a great fit for Tottenham Hotspur. But the only thing that is the question mark for me is the amount of control he wants and the amount of control that the board will give him.
And he's already shown what he can do with like little change in terms of going to Brighton. I don't know how many new signings he had because he took over in September, and he's really pretty much worked with what he's got and made them into this really amazing possession-based team who can counter-attack as well, can mix it with the big boys. It's been such an impressive managerial performance how he's playing with this Brighton team. I have to say, they've been an absolute joy to watch. They play some of the best football, not like in the Premier League for sure, not just like in the top half.
They just dispatched of Arsenal last week, and what was super impressive about the Arsenal game is they got battered to Everton a week before that, or half a week before that, and De Zerbi comes out and he goes, "You'll see the real Brighton at Arsenal," and I can't remember the exact words he was saying, but something of those ilk, and he followed through on that 100%. He went to the Emirates and played Arsenal off the park. Yeah,
and he's passionate. The players seem to love him. He seems to improve a lot of the players he's he's taken charge of, and it's been And also, what I like about De Zerbi is like, he'll put Pascal Gross a right back and he'll make it work. And he seems to be flexible as well. He doesn't seem very rigid. And it's been super impressive to watch. And to bring that to Tottenham would be an exciting prospect. There are rumours about him leaving, and whether or not he'll want to leave Brighton after only 8 months. But considering the job he's done, I'm not surprised. He's highly sought after. In terms of suitability, for me, he'll maybe rub some people the wrong way, I'm sure, but that's just his character. And if he can get the team playing like he's got Brighton playing, I think it'd be worth it. Yeah, I think he'd be a really loved character at Spurs, especially by the fans, De Zerbi. But let's talk about Javier Alonso next. And Dan Kilpatrick says that Alonso is of interest of Tottenham, although there are concerns about his lack of experience, and he is rated as an outsider to potentially succeed Antonio Conte. I mean, in terms of concerns about lack of experience, isn't that what we're going for at the moment? Isn't that what we want? A young up-and-coming manager that has longevity and that's going to stick around? Isn't that Javi Alonso? Yeah, it does. Look, it seems to me Tottenham, they're still not, even at this stage, when it comes to the reports that are coming out, we're concerned about Javi Alonso's lack of experience. So that's a concern. But then we also want a young up-and-coming manager, so that's why we're not going for Pochettino. We're pulling out a Nagelsmann because we're worried about his suitability, because he's already had a big job, I guess. I'm not really sure why we're not going going for someone like Nagelsmann, or why we say we're not.
And we don't want Poch because we want someone that Poch was 4 years ago.
Yeah, it's just madness. For someone like Alonso, he's clearly a very good up-and-coming manager. Yes, obviously, look, there are concerns, but no manager comes without risk. There's not going to be any manager. Look, if I say, yes, I want Arne Slot, well, he hasn't managed outside of Holland, so that's a concern. Like, any manager that you point out, there's going to be a concern. Oh, I want Nagelsmann, yeah, but look how we got sacked by Bayern Munich. Like, you can throw any concern at any manager. So for me, you just got to make sure you do your due diligence, and when you pick someone, make sure you go all out for him and you back him. And it's fine, you can have these concerns about Alonso, but don't let just a lack of experience put you off potentially getting a very exciting young manager.
Yeah, and these concerns have hurt us in the past on the playing side as well. When you look at the likes of Kvisha and Kim Min-jae and all these kind of players that we've been heavily linked to and potentially could have done deals so easily in the past for so cheap. And because our concerns of lack of experience and all these kind of things come into play, we don't get them and they go on to other clubs and become world-class players.
We've had David Webb recently say how Tottenham had potentially game-changing transfers in the building, and because they've been unsure about their lack of experience, they don't want to stump up the money. Even though the head scout or one of their scouts is like, look, this player, we should go for him, they've said no, because they're not sure about it. Like people like Mane, Upamecano, they've said Spurs could have easily gotten, but they bolted it because they weren't sure about him. And so they have to make sure that they're listening to the right people.
Yeah, absolutely. And all this says to me what a mess this manager search is, over and over
We
again.
shouldn't, to be honest, this club shouldn't even be looking at managers right now before we have a director of football. Then we have to work with him to find the best manager. And then he should be the ones who should be developing the concern. I don't want to hear about Levy's concerns about his lack of suitability. I want to hear about director of football having concerns.
100%. But that brings us nicely on to the last topic of the update, and that is Julian Nagelsmann. Dan Kilpatrick says that Nagelsmann will not be the next Tottenham manager, barring any unlikely twist. And Romano says a lack of clarity over who could fill the sporting director role prompted Julian Nagelsmann to tell Spurs he was not able to consider taking the manager's job. So, I mean, now the truth comes out. Now it all makes sense. But if we do bring in someone like a Tim Steidten or maybe a Johannes Spors, who we're not currently in the running for at the moment, do you think that could change his mind?
You never know. Look, you never know in football. We've seen it with Tottenham in the last couple of years. We said that we were out of the running for Nuno. We ended up appointing him 2 months later. Well. Conte, we had conversations with him. He was out the running, and then we panicked and ended up signing him as well. So look, I would say never in football. It doesn't seem as a definitive no than the Chelsea one, to be fair. Although it does seem like we're not interviewing him. We're pretty much saying, look, we are pretty much saying no, but it doesn't seem like when the Chelsea news came out, it was like Nagelsmann has said no and that's game over. We haven't quite heard that yet, but it does seem like it's very, very unlikely.
From my understanding of it, and I think the narrative hasn't changed throughout the whole of the Nagelsmann from start to finish, where it said Nagelsmann ain't going to consider Spurs until we bring in a sporting director. That was always the line. Mm-hmm. So I don't see why that would change now. We still don't have a sporting director. So I don't see why Nagelsmann will even come to the table to talk to us until we have one. That's
always been my biggest concern about approaching Nagelsmann at this point when we don't have our house in order. Why would he say yes to when we're a complete mess? To be fair, the only difference to what we heard before and now is that Tottenham themselves are saying he's not going to be part of the interview process, which is a very odd thing to say. Why completely rule that out? There shouldn't be an interview process without sporting director. But I agree with that as well. But to be honest, I've got to completely say, looking at that list of sporting directors, and then Nagelsmann comes in, and there's like, okay, we have this list of sporting directors we're looking at. Well, they're all completely different. Yeah. There's not, then you know what I mean. They all have like very different visions. They're not like of a similar ilk of sporting director. Like the Brentford guy is completely different to how Thiago Pinto would work at Roma, or how Tim Steidten would work at Leverkusen. Like all very different, with very different visions of how they see football. So of course Nagelsmann's coming in was like, well, I don't want to come in.
Don't know what you want.
Exactly. I don't want to come in and say, oh, I want to work under Johannes Spors or Tim Steidten, and then you bring in Pinto and it's like completely different. Like you don't know what you want, Tottenham, so why would I buy into this vision? If you don't know what you want, how can I believe that you're going to do what's right for me? And so I think that's the biggest point at the moment.
And it
makes sense.
Drives me mad, right? It drives me mad from when you go from Pochettino, when you've got a set thing going on here, young, up and coming, progressive football, pride pressing football. You completely throw that out the window and bring in Jose Mourinho, Nuno, Conte. Daniel Levy's coming out saying we need to get back to the DNA. He hires Nuno and then Conte. And then right now we're sitting here being like, the whole narrative is like Spurs want to get back to that DNA. Spurs want to get back to attacking football. And yet still the people that they're interviewing, the people that are on this list, are still, some of them are on that other way of thinking. So, I mean, this club is they just don't know what they want.
No.
They just do not know what they want. And it's just such a mess from the sporting director search to the manager search. We're 51 days into the manager search now. We're still none the wiser about anything at this football club.
Probably further than we've ever been, I would say. Literally. And all these concerns that all the Spurs fans have been saying, like now we've got managers coming and saying the same thing. So you can't brush this under the carpet anymore. It's there for all to see. We're literally getting rejected by managers because of this board and the lack of clarity and the lack of sporting direction and vision. And this is all we've been saying.
Yeah, exactly, spot on. But that is the situation regarding the sporting director and managerial search at the moment. Let me know in the comments section below what you think of the news updates, who you want as sporting director, who you want as manager. We'll see you very soon. Like, subscribe and comment. And as always,
come on you Spurs.